right. Let's keep going.
Objective, between even different people. But I think the big thing that you can, really stress for people is like sit down and just try and tell a story, right? Just try and tell the story that you want to tell. And if that resonates with people, then that's great. But you won't get there by trying to like turn something into something that it's not, right? I've written a bunch of different articles.
Oh, like writing a video game and calling it an SCP?
In the past that were, I went into them thinking like, okay, this is going to be my next big thing. And they have floundered because, I was approaching it with the wrong kind of headspace, right? I went into it thinking like, I need to do everything I can to make this the next big thing.
I hate to be so mean, but the kind of individual who takes 5 years to realize, I mean, you're looking at the same kind of person who, let's say, gets into the NFL, gets a couple $1 million, right off the bat, and just squanders it all, just spends it all on drugs and, a Lamborghini that they wreck. I mean, it's almost like a zoological study to watch such a brain take so long to figure out what are truly the most basic and the most elementary of considerations in the artistic mentality.
And then inevitably, if I even got the article out, it would just kind of be disappointing. It didn't do the way I wanted to do, and then I would get discouraged.
And that's why it's a bad way to do it. That's why it's unhealthy. Is because if you're playing to other people's likes and loves, and your true arbiter of quality and talent and satisfaction is not yourself, then you're always going to be disappointed because you can't please everybody.
I think that's not a healthy way to approach it, right? I think the better option is to find a way, or find the story that you want to tell the story in an interesting way, and then see what happens. And don't get turned off if it's if it's not performing the way that you want it to, and understand that reactions to things on the wiki are fully fluid, and you can't really predict or nail down what any one reaction to an article is going to be based off of.
You really can't. That's really true. There is no way. It's almost like rolling a dice. Trying to figure out what would be successful. There's no way to know. But what you can do, and what people like djkaktus have really perfected and mastered, people like Rounderhouse as well, is that you can intentionally construct your writing to appeal to the lowest common denominator. We're talking about the same level of assumed intelligence of the audience as, which we would see in corporate marketing campaigns. That's really, they take the temperature of the room intellectually. Again, these are mostly 15 to 19-year-olds. And as djkaktus has stated, tailors the articles to the anticipated positive reception of those individuals more pronounced than any sort of internal artistic vision or integrity.
Past experiences. But if you were going to ask about it, like a single element that I think needs to be in every article for it to be successful, images. I think images need to be on every single article. It's not that hard, and you don't need to make them. I mean, one of the things that turns me off to an article immediately is opening up a page and not seeing any pictures. And I know that sounds like, you can't see pictures. It needs his picture book.
Well, you said it, not me.
But it's such a way to connect a story with an emotion, or with really anchor the reader in a moment. Because we as humans are very visual in how we engage in memory, and how we engage in storytelling. You're effectively, when you're writing, you're trying to capture an image and put it in somebody's brain, and that's a lot easier, I think, when you actually have a picture on the page.
When the picture does it for you, right? When the picture does your job as an author for you. No, I'm kidding. I'm giving him a hard time. A picture is really worth 1,000 words, and so that's great. I mean, if you can save us from reading 1,000 more words of your article by just putting a picture in there, then that's great. Honestly, I'm not against pictures in articles. They were there from the beginning. In fact, pictures and articles are really at the heart of what the genre is. We wouldn't have gotten SCP-173 if it weren't for the picture. So, it's a losing argument to try to say that confic articles should be written without an image, but it's equally as losing of an argument to say that an article without a picture is necessarily at a deficit, which is what is being said here. I'm sorry, but that just once again reaffirms, the intellectual tier that I think, this individual and people who look up to this individual and people who mimic and mock this, and not mock but mimic this individual, sort of live at. That's really their tier.
And plus, it's super easy. Like, I wrote an article 3930. It's the pattern screamer, and that's an article about nothing.
It's a good one.
It's
a good one.
I mean, literally in the world of the article is an article about nothing, and it's really hard to find a picture of nothing. So what I did instead was I put in just a picture of some mountains in like the region that the article took place in, and that was enough. And honestly, it's one of my favorite pictures in any article that I put on the wiki period.
That's cool.
You don't need to be
cool
some
little
kind
factoid
of,
there.
Photoshop person or CSS wizard or something to make something that is acceptable and cool. I mean, some of my favorite pictures on the wiki are the ones that are the most understated, and I think that's
well done.
I think that's something that people really need to include. I mean, it's not a deal breaker. Obviously, there have been great articles written that don't have that. But if you really want to kind of zhuzh it up in a way that immediately captures people's attention, a good picture will do that.
So once again, these are techniques from the school of lowest common denominator marketing.
Okay, good advice. And I think especially the first half of what you said about writing something and not expecting it to be like big when you write it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that applies to honestly any form of content.
See, Shawn Saxum, this is one of the reasons why I like him. I mean, he basically comes in, and this is kind of it's not meant to be a slight, but it's like one of those backhanded comments. It's like if you were to tell a really elderly person that they have really smooth hands for their age or something like that. Shawn Saxum comes in and is like, oh yeah, that's basically like, djkaktus, that's kind of like the case with everything, and it's like pretty common. It's like it's not even 101. It's like kindergarten level realizations you're talking about here in the artistic world. Never mind.
Just focusing on making something that'll do well rather than something that actually makes you happy just always leads to misery, usually burnout, stuff like that.
Well, it leads to a lot of upvotes. It also leads to a lot of money if you're in a highly commercial artistic sphere that does this. But yeah, I mean, basically djkaktus is writing with the charts in mind. You read stories about musicians and artists who always grew up in the culture of, hey, you've got to commercialize your stuff. And at some point, the lucky ones, the ones that are a slight cut above the rest, have this sort of revelatory moment where they're like, wait a minute, there's more to this art than just writing for the charts. There's more to this art than just writing for what other people expect me to do and what other people want to see me do. And, kudos to those authors. Some of them never get to that point. And it's sad to say. Some do, and some much, much later and slower due to whatever factors. It's not just a matter of processing. It's also incentives that keep them from being honest with the realization that they may for many years have recognized, such as upvotes on the SCP Wiki.
Like that?
Well, here's the thing about that, too. And, since we were eventually going to get to this anyway. So I had a big Twitter thread a couple of weeks ago about kind of my experiences with expectations on the wiki, and how for the longest time I was my approach to the wiki was not a healthy one. I when I started getting a little bit of steam behind me, and I got some momentum going here, I started aiming for, okay, this next article needs to reach such and such many upvotes, and I need to be able to get to such and such place. I want to get to this place on the top overall board.
I love this because it makes, once again, my job very easy. I don't have to say anything. I just let him go. But I do want to point out that I said literally the same thing to him in 2019, and it's documented forever, that he said that the assessment was disingenuous, and that because I wasn't neck deep in the status quo culture of the site and community, that I therefore didn't have any authority to speak on this, something like this, and that I didn't know what I was talking about. And if you boil that down, that argument he made, and reduce it down, he's essentially saying no one should or can take your criticisms and words seriously because you don't have the upvote capital here, which was its own verification and vindication and validation of what I was saying. But DJ Cactus didn't understand that, neither did anyone else really. And we see, 3 years later, he's starting to understand. But once again, I'm pausing for the second reason here, is because I want you to realize how impossible it is to have what he's saying right now in the same brain as what he said earlier about not giving a shit about the rules of the format and writing for whatever the audience wants him to write. And if it makes them upvote more, then fuck the genre. These things are dichotomous. Those two things are dichotomous. You can't have both. You can if your brain has been fried on what is essentially an intravenous addictive narcotic, which is upvotes, just packaged in the chemical structure of dopamine. Really, we see in DJ Cactus a mind at war with itself and a spirit, a spirituality that is fractured and at war with itself. But it once again, the point of my blog post about this, which I included in the last video's description, I'll do it to this one as well, was essentially cheerleading DJ Cactus. Ultimately, obviously, I didn't have unanimous positive things to say about him, as I don't here. But the bottom line is that he's making progress. We shouldn't be too hard on him. DJ Cactus is not the sharpest tool in the shed. And we should be happy that he is coming around to these sorts of thoughts at all. So that's really what it's about. And, for as rude and as critical of a person as I have been about DJ Cactus, no one would be happier and no one would be more congratulatory than me if he were to continue in this direction and catch up his feelings that he's talking about now with the more deep roots of his philosophy, which he talked about earlier.
For upvotes. And I did that for a long time, like multiple years. And that is the top overall board for
I'm gonna go back.
Get to such and such place. I want to get to this place on the top overall board for upvotes. And I did that for a long time, like multiple years. And that is not good, right? I wasted a lot of time that I could have spent, living my life if I had not been doing that. And it's just not like there's a healthy approach to creating any kind of content, right? Where you do it because you enjoy doing it, or because it brings you joy, or because it is something that you enjoy doing in your free time. And that's kind of how I approach it now, right? Like I have projects.
But once again, this is completely incompatible with his previous statement. There's two philosophies that he's simultaneously trying to hold up like spinning plates here at the same time, and it's a juggling act that you just can't do. You can't sustain that because they're mutually exclusive. The first way that he's talking about, that he once again previously endorsed in this podcast, not 20 minutes ago in the podcast, and he's contrasting that with a new way. And the best way to put it is that the first way, the way that he's done for so long, that it's nice that he's moving away from this, but it's like wrecking the car into the ditch and walking away from it and being sorry. I mean, that's great, but you've already wrecked it. And there's people who are in the car who are still like wrecked. And that's what the SCP Wiki is. That's what his schools of thought are, whether it's colossal containment fiction, which is once again designed with a marketing strategy at core to appeal to the lowest common denominator, or it's something like Neo-Lol Foundation, which he also is sort of a godfather of. It's nice to do those things, but it's a whole other thing entirely to attempt to approach the fix that would be needed to change the mind of the rest of the SCP Wiki space, especially the authors who emulate DJ Cactus specifically because of his lording and this unhealthy mentality he's talking about. Especially when it comes to upvotes. And so the difference between the two ways are, it's like you can either have a looking glass that you see through, or you can have a mirror. Okay, what is the glass that you use? And DJ Cactus's historical way of approaching this and the way that he's talking about was a bad thing, and yet the way that he endorsed earlier in the podcast is that glass is a mirror, where you're looking into the computer screen and you're typing, but it's really just a mirror to see yourself. And the other thing is a window, where you get to express yourself. You push yourself through it. You see what's out there, and it's a window into your soul. So these two things, just to make it very clear why I'm talking so much about this. I hope it's clear enough without me saying it, because DJ Cactus says it himself without my help. But they're completely incompatible. And what you're looking at is the first little germinated bud and stalk of a plant that is starting to grow now that it is nourishing itself properly in the proper philosophical soil. But it hasn't flowered yet, and the roots don't really go down as deep as the other things that are sitting right next to it in the pot.
That I've been working on for a long time. And the reason I have taken such a long time to work on them is because I'm not letting those articles, or my expectations for those articles get in the way of like my actual work, right? Like what I do when I'm not here.
Yeah, once again, this is not a profound thing. I mean, I'm sorry, it is profound for DJ Cactus and his internal personal mythology, and I get that, and that's great. But in the context of the greater artistic experience, you're looking at just basic something plus something equals something arithmetic here. It's just so elementary.
And it's just it's hard to tell people, especially from the position that I'm in now, because it's easy for me to say like, oh yeah, the upvotes don't matter. Like, go live your life, and people will say like, well, but you're the upvote guy. Like,
hey, imagine telling somebody that when you aren't the upvote guy, and then the upvote guy tells you that you're wrong, like 3 years ago, and now he's agreeing with you and repeating what you've said to him, as if he came up with it himself. Imagine that.
How can you
That's a little different.
And what I try and tell people is like, yeah, I can say it from experience that this is the, this is where that leads you. I mean, I spent a lot of unhappy years.
Yet you don't have to spend those unhappy years to know that this is where this leads you. That was my whole point. You really don't. I mean, this is like saying that you have to shoot up black tar heroin to understand how bad it is. You don't. All you have to do is just, think about it for a second. You just need someone telling you clearly and just thinking about it. You don't have to have black tar heroin into your vasculature to understand how it's going to destroy and wreck your life. But here we see a junkie who's hit rock bottom. And the people who were telling him that years ago, he's finally repeating the words of, but it's just sad that he had to experience this in order to get to where he is now. It really is.
Where I was just sort of masking my own personal issues with,
it's a drug
on the wiki. That little hit of dopamine that you get whenever you see that little number go up, and that's not good. Like that's not a healthy place to be.
That's amazing. That's exactly what I told him 3 years ago.
Do it because you like to do it. Do it because it's fun. Don't do it because
it's all right. He's younger than me.
Get a number or reach some kind of position that you have in mind, because that's just it's a losing effort, and you will not be happy as a result of it.
Agreed completely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how do you get ideas or inspiration for SCPs?
Now, hey, that's great that you say that, but the next step is just apply it. Apply it to everything else, because you've taken the first step. You put your toes into the water. Good job. Now do the rest.
I people ask me this all the time, and I don't really have a good answer for it because
for example, his author page is still unchanged. If you know anything about his author page, that's all I need to say. His author page he hasn't changed anything. He's talking a lot. He makes Twitter threads about it. But when actions come to actions and when the rubber meets the road, he hasn't done anything different.
I think this is one of those things that is, like this.
Other people, by the way, have made the argument that the only reason he's gotten to this evolution, this level of intellectual evolution, which once again, entry level shit, is that he is politically cornered. Because over the years, 3 years or so, we've seen at least some increasing concessions from the people who are the deepest within the SCP culture and community, conceding to things, at least terminologically, as telling as upvote brain rot. I mean, that's something that was used on an O5 command thread, for example. So this slowly has crept its way into the community despite their best efforts of ignorance, and people have become more aware of the social media pitfalls and really mind traps that exist on the SCP Wiki, because it is being cloaked as a writing site. It's actually a social media site. And so with that increasing understanding comes a political pressure. If you're the one guy who is the epitome of this increasingly pathophysiological and this increasingly diagnosed disease that has long since eroded the vitality of the SCP Wiki, you're necessarily going to, especially if you're a politician, which djkaktus is, let's not forget, you're going to have to address it, just from an optics standpoint. And so that's something that other people have argued, that this really isn't as genuine as djkaktus is stating. I don't know if I go that far. I really do want him to see this in a genuine fashion. That's all I really ever wanted. So I'm going to choose to believe that he's doing this genuinely. But other people have said that and have pointed to things like Dr. Gears's June 2021 interview, where he basically calls djkaktus out in all but name by saying that the problems of the SCP Wiki really boil down to ego and the upvote rating module thing complex. I'm sure people like djkaktus had to clench their anuses quite hard when they first read that statement by Dr. Gears. And I like to think that in the periphery of their vision, they may have seen me Jack Nicholsoning like this. So at some point, it's check, and you've got to make a move out of it.
Asking somebody where their dreams come from, right? Like when you are, you can't really
And
answer
the way, I'll just finish it this way, the way that argument is sort of, convincing in some way, like I said, I'm not subscribing to it, but it certainly has legs, is because he's talking the talk. He's not actually walking the walk. We don't actually see him decrying anything in action that he's talking about in theory. His author page has not changed.
You don't know, like those things just sort of pop up spontaneously, right? They appear and they don't have, you can't say like, well, I thought about such and such during the day and then I had a dream about it. Like that's not really how that works. Those things just kind of generate. But generally how I've answered this question in the past is that what I try and do is, if I am experiencing, and it's the same way with, I watch a lot of movies, I watch a lot of, or listen to a lot of radio, listen to a lot of music, and generally what I'm trying to do is capture an emotion, right? Like
I'm going to share with you something. I've already told you this, but before I was a writer, I was a musician, still am, and I've made one of my SCPs actually has an original song on there. I think it's SCP-4991. But I've written music and sang and produced music for since I was 18, so it's a long time. And every time I'm doing something like this video, there's something in the back of my mind that says you could be writing music. Every time I'm doing something like criticizing someone from SCP, writing a blog post, there's something in the back of my mind. Doing anything with the Confic magazine or Confic Wiki or Confic call-in, there's something in the back of my mind that says you could be writing more music right now. And I got to tell you, that is such a temptation for me that that hopefully tells you how important this is to me, because if it wasn't for me, I don't know how many people, if any, would be saying something like this. But I think it's needed, and there's a genre to save, and so I'm happy to do it. Catch you guys next time.